In order to protect these research participants' rights, we don't just trust that scientists are all going to do the right thing. We have ethical boards who govern this. So at every institution that does research, like here at UT Tyler, there is an IRB, an internal review board, or sometimes institutional review board. They are set up to monitor the ethics that surround research with human subjects. So every person who conducts HSR or human subject research has to get approval from their methods from the IRB. The IRB helps conduct a risk-benefit analysis. Now, I am on the IRB, so I'm one of the people who, I'm also a researcher, but I'm also one of the people who reviews those studies. So before researchers conduct a study at UT Tyler, they have to write out an application. Now we have an online system for it, and they send it to us on the institutional review board, and we help decide whether they need to make any changes to their study to help protect the rights of participants, like that respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. But I keep talking about putting participants at risk. What counts as a risk? Obviously, risk of physical harm is something we want to greatly minimize or avoid at all if possible. But that's going to be part of your study if you're doing a clinical trial for a drug, right? There's a risk for side effects. You need to be able to demonstrate that the benefit from learning about this drug could be greater, outweighed by any harm that might come from these side effects. Psychological distress is also a risk. So as psychology researchers, we have the potential to put our participants at risk. Fatigue is also a risk. It's very minor, but we do not want to exhaust our research participants. Another very common one is a potential breach of privacy or confidentiality. Research participants have the right for nobody to ever know that they participated in that study, and we need to protect their anonymity or confidentiality, especially if they're answering questions about potentially embarrassing or socially damaging information. We do not want that information getting out. So we have to protect data very carefully against any kind of hacking or breaches. We want to keep participants at what's called minimal risk, which is the fact that the likelihood of harm or discomfort that they might experience is not any greater than they might encounter in everyday life. We need to, again, obtain informed consent from our participants. We need to get information about the potential risks of participating in a study, even if those risks are very small, like just being fatigued from answering a lot of questions in a row. We need to give information about the procedure. This does not mean that we have to tell participants the hypothesis, because remember, one of our risks to internal validity is reactivity. Participants might give you what they think you want to hear, so we don't need to tell them exactly what we're looking for. We just need to tell them what we are going to ask them to do. There are two ways that we can do this. We have consent and assent. Consent is for people who are of age, 18 or older in the United States, and who can legally consent. If somebody else in their family has power of attorney over them and they're legally considered incapable of making their own decisions, like being very mentally disabled, then we also need to not just ask their guardian to get them to participate in research, or when we recruit children for research, we don't just ask their parents. We need to also explain things to the child or explain things to that developmentally disabled person and get their permission as well. Parents give consent. So consent is the legal term for signing the form and saying that they agree to it, but we also need assent. We need that child or developmentally disabled adult to say, yes, I agree, or to indicate their willingness in some way. And if they're over 7 and we can expect them to read and write, we actually need them to write their assent as well. So they will also need to sign the form. Here is what a consent form might look like. This is from Dr. Hayes' research when she was in graduate school. I think it's a pretty good example of explaining the procedures of a study in very plain language. And because I don't do research with children, I use her consent and assent forms. So she's got the one here where she's asking the parents for their permission to enroll their child in the study. And then on the assent form, this is what the child is expected to read and understand and sign as well. When we get informed consent from participants, we also need to make sure they are free from coercion. We can't place any pressure on them to take part in the study. We cannot threaten them. We can't guilt trip them into it. The researcher can't be in a position of power or authority over the participant. And we can't do something like making participating in research a part of their grade. Now, in many of y'all's classes, you have to participate in research on SONA as part of your grade for the class, right? Like an intro to psych. But we actually legally are required to give you an alternative to that. So if you choose not to participate in research, that is still your right. You need to write a research article review, write a short paper that involves about the same amount of effort as participating in a study. So we are still legally covering all of our bases here by giving you that alternative so that we're not pressuring you to participate in research when it is your choice to make that informed consent. Deception is sometimes used in studies, not to the degree that Zimbardo or Milgram did it before, but we still do it today because sometimes we have to distract or trick people to get them to behave naturally. Because again, we have reactivity from people being observed, or they're going to tell us what they think we want to hear. Deception, we can only use it according to the American Psychological Association, or APA. We can use it under certain conditions. If the research is really, really important and it can't be done without having to deceive participants, and there's no foreseeable harm. So they still need to be put at minimal risk. And now we not only have ethics governing how we treat research participants, but ethics in the publishing process. Just like we have ethics for y'all writing papers in your classes to help you avoid plagiarism, we have similar ethics in publishing the results of our studies as scientists. So we have ethics that govern what order the authors' names go in based on the amount that they contributed to the main ideas to the study. We also have ethics about making data available. So it might be that we need to err on the side of protecting our research participants' privacy, and we can't share our data. In some cases, we can just take the participants' names off of our data and share that data so that other scientists could try and replicate our study or redo our analyses and make sure that we didn't cheat with our data in any way or lie about it. We are not allowed to duplicate publications or even apply to multiple journals for our publications at the same time. So if I complete a research study, I have written it up as an article, I cannot apply to try to publish it in multiple journals at the same time and just see which one accepts me first. I have to sign a form that says I have not sent this anywhere else and it's never been published anywhere else before. We are also not supposed to do what's called piecemeal publication, where we might do a single study, but then we break it up into a lot of tiny little parts so that we can publish each individual part as a separate article, because we do get more kind of credit in our jobs by the number of publications that we have. It's part of how we obtain our job security of tenure. We have to have a certain number of publications. So this is a way of kind of cheating for tenure and getting more publications by publishing only part of a study here and part of a study there as separate publications. So now I want you to stop the video and try and pretend you are an IRB member and review some of the study scenarios that I have for you, and that will be worth some extra credit points.